Hey everybody, welcome to Acrylics Made Easy. Today we're going to paint a jellyfish. So grab your brushes and let's go. Alrighty, on our palette here we've got golden fluid acrylics, Hansa yellow, vat orange, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, teal, turquoise, Payne's gray, and titanium white. And we're going to start with a large filbert brush. This is a number 50 filbert brush made by Simply Simmons. And we're going to take some white paint on there. Grab a little tiny bit of teal. And we're going to start painting in the water behind our jellyfish. Right, let's go to our canvas. And we're just going to start putting this color on at the top. And go all the way across with it. And then work our way down a little bit lower in the center. Kind of giving a little bit of a downward rounded shape to this color. Let's make it a little bit darker. So going back to the palette, adding more teal, and back to the canvas. Let's add this teal on there. Now acrylics do dry very fast, but you have a window of time, just a few minutes, after you put one color on there to blend the next color into it. So we've got these two colors next to each other here, but this color at the top is still a little bit wet. So I can blend right into it using this nice, soft filbert brush and make that edge go away. Just like that. Now I'm going to make the color darker as it goes down toward the bottom. So let's get back to our palette, get a little more teal, and this time we're going to add some turquoise. Oh, isn't that a nice color? That's very nice, I think. Let's put that on the canvas. That's looking good. Again, sort of bringing it a little bit lower in the middle. And after I've got the color on there, this color above is still wet, so I can blend right into it. I'm just holding my brush so it's kind of halfway on one and halfway on the other color, and going back and forth. Because the brush has a nice soft shape, it will blend it all together pretty smooth. Looking good. Let's make it even darker at the bottom. More turquoise and a little bit of Payne's gray this time. Just push it really dark. And we're going to finish off the canvas with this darkest color all the way across the bottom. And once again, I can sort of fill in the empty space first. And because that color above is wet, I can blend right up into it with a few long brush strokes, just like that. Alright, that's looking great. Now, let's start painting some jellyfish. So, back to the palette. I'm going to take this brush I've been using. I'm going to stick it in this water over there so that it won't dry out before I get a chance to clean it. And we'll pick up a filbert brush. It's a number 6 filbert. Actually, before I use that, I'm going to do a little trick that I like. I'll show you what I like to do here. Grab a paper towel, just sort of roll it up, bunch it up, get the end of it just a little bit wet. Not dripping wet, but a little bit damp. And come back to our canvas here. And because I want my jellyfish to be really bright, and I don't want to have to kind of compete with all this darker turquoise color, I'm just going to pick out where I want the jellyfish to be, and using the paper towel, just remove some of that paint. Okay, I want to give it a nice rounded top, and the bottom has sort of this fluffy edge. Once you've got a lot of paint on that paper towel, you just use a different part of it. And we don't have to get it 100% clean, but we want to get most of the paint out of that little spot. So I'm going to grab a new paper towel Again, I'm just taking that paper towel, kind of bunching it up, dipping the end a little bit without getting it super soaking wet, and you can come back here and clean that up a little bit more. Now this is something that you can only do right after you put the paint on there. So if you were to come back the next day, the paint would not come out. Even if you went and ate a sandwich and come back, it would be really hard to do this. But if you do it right away, you can get that canvas pretty clean. Nice spot for our jellyfish to live. I'm going to go a little bit maybe bigger with it. Push it a little bit wider. That's looking pretty good though. While we're at it, let's carve out some space for the tail-like appendage that comes out of the bottom. That's the oral arms of the jellyfish, they call them. Just a lacy sort of appendage that comes out, very sort of random in its shape. So I'm going to put some color in there later on, but for now I just want to kind of get it a little bit lighter, make it easier to work with. And I like to have a lot of texture in there, so I'm not trying to make it smooth. I like to have it sort of ruffled like that. And let's go ahead and do another jellyfish on the other side. So putting that in the garbage, grabbing a new paper towel, dip the end, squeeze it out so there's not too much water, and let's do one right over close to the edge here. Again, nice sort of domed, rounded shape on top, and then on the bottom, sort of this ruffled, folded edge. Okay, I have to clean that up a little bit more, I think. So one more paper towel ought to do it. Dip the end, make sure it's not too wet, and clean that up the rest of the way. Looking good. And why not just one more, just barely poking out from the bottom. 3 is always a good number. Somehow in art, 3 is always just a nice number. I think those 3 jellyfish would be just perfect for us. I'm going to carve out a little bit of space for the oral arms on this one. And we can start painting those jellyfish now. So, let's get back to our palette. Grab that filbert brush that I was just talking about. So that's a number 6 filbert. And I'm going to get some white paint on there. A little bit of yellow. So white and yellow is just going to be the color we'll start with. Let's get back to our jellyfish here. So it'll be a little bit darker on the very bottom. So I'm going to leave this bottom space open, but bring this yellow across. I like to have kind of a squiggly line at the bottom, and then we'll blend it out towards the top. Just something like that. We'll do the same thing on this other one here. So leave a little bit of space at the bottom for the darker kind of orange we'll put there. Squiggly line at the bottom of this yellow, and then giving it a little rounded shape toward the top. And then the very bottom one here, I'll just put a little bit of yellow in there. Kind of mixed with some green, but that's okay. We're going to let that be a little bit darker anyway. So let's get back to our palette and give this brush a little bit of a rinse. And let's get a little bit darker. So a little bit of yellow and some orange mixed together. That's a nice color. Let's come across the top of these jellyfish. Now the top part of a jellyfish is known as the bell. So we're going to color the top of the bell with some of that real bright orange, and go ahead and just bring it right around the bottom. So just kind of filling in all the empty space now with this color. And like I said, I want it to have this kind of wiggly edge here at this point. On the top, I want it to blend together. So I'm just going to go across where the two colors meet. And because this filbert brush has that rounded shape, it lets us softly blend those colors together. Pretty nice. Let's do that to this other jellyfish on the other side. So we'll get some more of that yellow and orange on here. Looking good. And once again, coming across the top. with that. And then go ahead and come across the bottom too. Leaving it a wiggly sort of edge where the yellow and orange meet on the bottom. And then I want it to blend together at the top, so I'm just going to go where the two colors meet, go over it a few times till it looks a little smooth. Pretty good. Now let's go ahead and add some orange to that third one down at the bottom. So more vat orange and Hansa yellow mixed together makes a nice bright orange. And we'll come to this bottom jelly and give him some of that orange color too. Alright, looking good. Blend it out just a little bit. Okay, pretty good. Now I think I want to go a little bit darker on the very outer edge of this jelly here, just to kind of make it pop a little bit more. So let's go back to our palette. Let's get a little bit of magenta. Ooh, I love that quinacridone magenta, such a beautiful color. And a little bit of ultramarine blue. Make ourselves a nice dark purple. And just ever so carefully, I'm going to go across the very top. Jelly here. And that purple edge just really makes the bright color underneath pop out. Doesn't it? That's a beautiful thing. Okay, going over it to blend it in a little bit towards the center. And I think I want to blend it a little bit smoother, so let's go back to our brush washer here. And I'm going to clean this brush out. Don't have to get it 100%, but get it most of the way clean. And then I'm going to take the dry brush now. I call it dry, it's mostly dry. And just use that brush now to tie those colors together. Since all those colors are still wet enough, they're workable, and we can make that happen. Alright, that's pretty nice. Now let's work on the appendages coming out of the bottom. That's the oral arms, they're called. Let's go back to our palette. We're going to clean that brush out a little bit. Make sure we don't have any of that dark color on there. And I want to get a nice bright white and yellow with just a hint of orange. Something like that. Looks pretty good. And we'll start out at the top of this appendage. And what I like to do is find the spots where it's already the lightest and just really gently, loosely holding the brush, just start adding some highlights. You can see I'm holding the brush almost perpendicular to the canvas, almost laying it flat on there and using that long edge of it. It kind of just gives you a looser feel, which is what we want for this type of thing here. We don't want a super tightly controlled brush stroke because it's not going to give us the natural feel that we want. Alright, come over to this other jelly, add a little bit, again, just kind of where it's already the brightest. And that'll do. Let's get a little bit of magenta in the bottom of those oral arms there. I keep wanting to call them tails, but they're oral arms. You know, everybody's got to eat, even a jellyfish. So they use their oral arms. All right, let's take a little bit of white and some magenta. A little bit of that quinacridone magenta that I love so much. This magenta with the turquoise is just a great combination. So we're going to get some of that going over here in the bottom. Just starting at the bottom, again sticking to sort of the brightest areas. And I don't need it to go all the way up, I'm just going to kind of go, I don't know, from the bottom to about halfway. With that, and add just a little bit in the bottom to this one over here, just because I like the way it pops against that turquoise. Beautiful. Okay, how about a few background jellyfish? I think that's a good idea. Let's get back to our palette. Give this brush a little rinse, a little wipe, and we'll use some background color. So some teal and turquoise, a little bit on the darker side of that mix, more turquoise than teal. And let's come back to our canvas and start putting in some background jellyfish. Now what I like to do with these is make sure I have a few that are overlapping behind our foreground jellyfish, because overlap is one of the main tools you can use to create a sense of distance and depth. If the edge of one object sticks behind the edge of another, it automatically looks further away. So we're going to use that to our advantage and put a couple that are sort of sticking out behind the jellies that we've already painted. Just something like that. Maybe one over here on the edge. When I paint these jellyfish, I like to try to, keep the outer edge of that bell sharp and then just sort of try to softly blend the inner portion. Just gives it a nice rounded look. And then in the center here, what I want to do is kind of give it a few just sort of almost ghosts of jellies, just kind of just across the top without doing the whole shape. I want the very top edge to be pretty sharp and then let it just fade out into the depths. Okay, something like that. I think maybe we need a couple really small ones over here. I'm going to get a little bit more of that dark color on the brush. And, the smaller they get, the further away they look, so we'll put a couple real small ones here. Maybe one more in the center. You don't have to go too crazy, but if you want, you can just fill it up with as many as you want. Beautiful. Now let's add some stingers to these jellyfish. So I'll take this brush that I've been using. I'm going to just drop it in the water with the other big one. Wash it out when we're all the way done. And I'm going to grab my little detail brush. This is a liner brush, a long, thin liner brush. I'm sorry I don't know the number of it. It's probably a 1 or a 2. It's got some paint on the handle kind of covering that part up, but just a thin liner brush. I'm going to get a little bit of water on there, mix it with some magenta and a little hint of blue. Get this nice rich purple color. And that little bit of water we added is going to make the fluid acrylic, which is already flows nicely, that little bit of water is going to make it flow like ink, which is what we want, because what I want to do here is do these stingers each in one brush stroke. Alright? So what I mean by that is I want to start at the top, and without lifting the brush, I'm going to work my way all the way off the canvas with it. And the reason I like to do that instead of painting it little bit by little bit is because you end up with these little elbows, these little joints where you're trying to start the line again. And I think it just looks better, even if the line tends to disappear and reappear, or just disappear entirely. Having something with a smooth curve to it is just so much more appealing. So I'm going to work my way across this jelly, across the bottom of it, just playing around with the shape of these curves. And I want probably half a dozen or so stingers coming across the front of it. So I just keep dipping my brush, and it's nice to have some of them cross over each other. Gives it a nice look. And every once in a while, I might have to add just another little drop of water to my mix, making sure that I get that really just fluid, ink-like consistency. And we've got just a few more to put on this one here. Come all the way off with that one maybe. It's fun to play around with the shape of these stingers, because if you've ever watched Jellyfish, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a big tank of these sea nettles. They're my favorite. The stingers just go every direction. I mean, they're sticking out into the water everywhere around them. And they do sort of tend to flow with the movement of the jellyfish, but they also just can go wild every different direction. So as an artist, it's fun to play around with something that kind of like can be anywhere. And then have one come out of here and just wrap around behind, disappear. Maybe it reappears down here. Why not? Let's do a couple more of it. Just sort of stick out and then tuck behind. That's a fun little effect. And let's do a few more on that jellyfish on the far right. Generally, I like to dip my brush, get freshly loaded with paint for each one of these. But if they're really short, like the one on the right here, you can do, a couple with each brush load there. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think we're going to call this jellyfish painting done. So, folks, I'm so glad you joined me to paint this jellyfish today. And we'll paint something again real soon. So make sure you like and subscribe to Acrylics Made Easy, and we'll paint again soon. Thanks, folks.